morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. Hoping a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint, and I wanted to continue off with our series for Hydra-related content. Right now, we've already done a couple of heads worth, and we're on the halfway point. If you've been following along, we did have reset recently, so I'm able to kind of look into it and maybe get a little bit more in depth and show you some case scenarios where like you're going to experience it. So we'll be a little bit more in depth, and we'll kind of show you a little bit more hands on what's going on, right? So I'm just going to throw together a quick team. As a matter of fact, this may not be a bad option here. We'll use this just to start us off. But today's head is going to be based off of not only the most dangerous one if left unattended, but the most frustrating one in terms of like playing around, I would say, because he's so like low key, the Head of Wrath, so low key, but it's kind of like if you're not careful and you're not paying attention to how his vengeance counters and other things go, he basically can pump out a lot of damage. He's known for being the one that's a hitter, right? So what does he do? Gnashing Jaws attacks all enemies. He places a decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. He has a passive effect where every single time someone hits him, his vengeance counter increases, right? Whenever the counter reaches 15 or more, because it has done that, it places a vengeance buff, a block debuff, and a reflect damage buff on this head for 1 turn, and then attacks all enemies. It's a big like burst. It's basically like a ticking time bomb, for lack of better words, right? The vengeance counter resets every time it reaches 15. Enemy hits will not be countered while under a vengeance buff. So that's like the buff he gets after the fact, right? It's basically like his cooldown. It's like a buff that's like a cooldown effect, right? For lack of better words, right? And then, of course, whenever he's decapitated, he inflicts all damage to all heads whenever he's clipped. And then, while under a vengeance buff, the damage inflicted to all heads increases, and there's a 25% chance of placing a leech debuff on all heads for 2 turns. So you can maybe sneak in some free extra damage this way if you're able to plan around it or to play around it whenever he has his vengeance buff, right? Additionally speaking, his A2 or his second ability is Furious Roar. Furious Roar attacks all enemies in places of provoke. So basically what you're going to see the Head of Wrath do is he's going to constantly have his vengeance counters go up by having you hit him, and then he's going to try to force you to hit him, which is, by provoking you, right? So if you don't have resistance, you don't have that block debuff, you don't have that cleanse, it's very likely that one of your rotations worth of your champions may end up going against this particular boss, right? And while he's also at it, he's increasing his attack. So he does that increased attack buff on him, and he's basically like, all right, now hit me. I'm waiting for this 15 counter so I can just pop, right? And that's basically the long and short of how this boss is managed, like how he handles himself throughout the fight. He does also fall in line with all the other heads having a passive. For his, it's going to be called Almighty Wrath. You kind of see like like some similarity, some commonality behind his naming, the naming convention, But he's also reducing a 10% AoE from, for any AoEs he takes 10% less. And then, of course, like the other heads, any damage, whether it's enemy max HP, doesn't cap 10%. HP burns do not exceed 20,000, HP. Same thing with War Master, Giant Slayer procs, or any of those type of reflux damages. They don't exceed 50,000 HP, right? And then, last but not least, he's also immune to pretty much every other debuff that's like hard CC. So, like stuns, sleep, provoke. Those do not affect him. He's immune to it, right? Same thing with, HP swap, turn meter manipulation, none of that really affects him like the other heads as well. Being honest with you, the biggest frustration with this guy in particular is the fact that his damage is something you have to take into account. You have to be prepared of managing it. And the question is, well, how? In tandem with what you already have used in other teams and the way we lined up this Hydra 101 series, the first couple of heads being kind of like a big nuisance, the Decay as well as Mischief being a little problematic. The answers you find in those heads are also answers that kind of deal with the Head of Wrath, for example, right? Right now he starts off, he's available to start taking some vengeance stacks. It looks like this little icon right here, and he'll start getting it. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and open up with Nuts A2 just so you can see it. He's gotten 1 stack because it was a 1 hit. Now, if I were to use, for example, Roussevark and go use his A1, which is a triple hitter, it's going to put him up to 4 stacks. Now, he also got Phantom Touch, which means that it was an extra proc, so Phantom Touch does affect that. I would also believe that, getting War Master or Giant Slayer procs also contributes to that stat number going up. And that could be a problem, right? Because you're constantly boosting up to a faster pace, and that could be a bit of an issue. But with that being said, one thing that I don't know if you noticed already, he has decreased attack. So one way you can manage the output of the boss is by putting those debuffs that neutralizes damage, right? In addition to that, whenever he does activate, remember, whenever he does do that that big old pop that comes from the Vengeance stacks at 15, he gets block debuff, reflect damage, and a couple other things that could be a problem, right? Say, for instance, we all got provoked here, and, you know, half of my team hits him, and then he, you know, he pops, he gets that reflect damage, and, you know, what better way to kill you, you know, to kill an enemy with their own damage, right? And to be honest with you, the way I'm built to, I want these guys to pack a punch, right? So in that regard, we have a concern here where if we were to pop him and we were to hit him under being provoked after the fact, he would get his buffs, which would also do more damage to us as we're laying into him, right? One way to avoid that, well, the same way that we managed dealing with the Head of Mischief, who unluckily didn't get the debuff, and you kind of see a problem here already, is block buffs. So in this particular case, I got Umbral Enchantress in play right here, and she would be able to place that buff as well as other alternatives like Ugo, that we mentioned before, Pantheroi, you know, just to name a couple examples, Deliana. It all depends on what you're working with, but there's some epics, there's some legendaries that you can use that will definitely help you get that debuff in play, right? And that's how it works. So as a matter of fact, I'm actually going to avoid doing damage here. This is just more of a demonstration of how it looks and how you can interpret him. He's already at 13 stacks, right? We got the decreased attack and we got the block buff. So now when we pop him, the things that you would want to look towards is, all right, how is my team looking? Do we have enough mitigation? Do we have increased defense? Do we have strength? Do we have shields? Anything around those lines that could help us out to survive a little bit longer may be fortuitous for us to go ahead and have prepared for the fact that we're about to pop them, right? If you don't, then you want to be a little careful, right? So my team outside of Veil, because this is an AoE hit whenever he pops, it's an attack all enemies as it says here. Whenever it does, you know, he then attacks all enemies, right? That will also contribute to mitigation because we have Veil. Veil reduces the amount of AoE damage we take, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do the A3 here so we can speed ourselves up. And there goes that buff that he was talking about earlier that he would get after, you know, he pops his Vengeance, right? So, you know, he would also have Reflect. He would also have block debuffs, which means it'd be harder to lock him down. But because we have block buffs already on him, it's less of an issue. So, you know, the damage output we got amongst my entire team right now, my Razavarg is built for Clan Boss. So he's very, very squishy. He's not built to survive and fight very, very, you know, consistently in an environment where there's a lot of damage intake. So being able to manage that and reduce the amount of damage we take is very, very important in a scenario like this, right? Now, my rotation would start off a little bit different. I would probably have, like, Leech already in play. My Razavarg would be already going a little bit faster because we would have put in, you know, increased speed and all that stuff like that. But the main concept is that the two key debuffs that you want to maintain at all times is going to be block buffs and then, of course, decrease attack. And ideally, if you can do that for everybody, you know, everybody's going to be doing less damage against you. And then, of course, they're all going to be, you know, removing the aspect of having a buff placed on them, whether that's from Blight or from Mischief whenever he tries to do his spread, right? So the more we can manage his damage output, the better. With that being said, we want to talk about some champions that could do that, right? We want to talk about champions that can bring those things to the table. And like all our other videos, if you haven't watched them, you can go take a look for Hydra. We look for champions that could do a multitude of things, not just one thing. Ideally, you want to start off by finding one champion that this is the best that you can do, that provides you, you know, the very, very best at block buffs, for example, or the very, very best at provoking, for example, right? Those are the type of things you're looking for. But then you want to find, if ideally the next step would be to find someone who's great at doing their key force, you know, their key thing, but also something else on top of that, right? So, like, I'm going to bring up a champion that I fell in love with that does a lot of work. It's Mishinaki. He provides Hex, which is valuable for, like, the Mischief Head. You know, we talked about that. As well as being able to apply additional spread damage, right? And then on top of that, you see how we keep talking about on top of that. On top of that, he provides a buff removal. And then on top of that, he also provides decreased defense, which is ideal. If the Hex is working in tandem with that, then he also gets the decreased attack. So, like, you're getting a lot of value from someone like Mishinaki, who's able to apply strip buffs and then lay in decent damage. You know, HP burns being one of the better damage outlets is still true to this point of Hydra, you know, in our session so far. You know, you get a lot of value out of it. So someone who can do these multitude of things are very, very ideal. I'll give another example. He's not so much, he kind of facilitates mostly the damage dealing role, but if you have been playing the game long enough, you should have access to him. It'll be Artek, for example. So being able to get those HP burns, you're getting your damage out there, right? And being able to activate them, but also benefiting from that activation, you get, like, decreased attack, right? So, like, decreased attack is not a bad thing in that regard, right? There are plenty of other champions that we can maybe look at that give you that, but the concept goes, you know, decrease attack, and then, of course, we're looking for block debuff champions, right? So, you know, we talked about G-Nut being really good for damage outlets in terms of his A3 enemy max HP. There's plenty of videos out there that you can use for him as a reference. But in tandem with that, he does have that weaken. He does have that decreased attack. That's AoE. That's a great opportunity to maybe, you know, control the Wrath Head and be able to do a little bit more, right? And then, of course, you know, he also brings some other things to the table, you know, like with the enemy max HP. He's more of a damage dealer and controller. You do want to be careful with that counterattack. If it gets stolen, you don't have that block buffs up. You know, maybe Mischief can give that to Wrath, and the next, you know, Wrath is hitting you back whenever you touch him, you know? So that could be a dangerous thing, a dangerous gamble, a dangerous game to play. I'm going to bring somebody else who kind of does a multitude of things that are kind of ideal. Provoke being one of them. HP Burn being another. As well as decreased attack. This is one of the key debuffs we're looking for. You know, Drexstar. You know, he's not too bad. And believe it or not, he actually scales up in resistance the more HP burns that are in play. So, you know, you'll be able to benefit from maybe having him be a provoker / mischief tank. You know, that would help. And then he also somehow is able to, you know, add a little bit of addressing the Wrath Head. He does very, very well in that regard, right? But these are just some examples of some free-to-play grabs that you can get. Let's look at what else we have for options that even I have access to. Stagnite, if you guys have just recently got through the guaranteed event. As a matter of fact, I think it's still ongoing as of this recording. If you haven't already got him, this may be a chance where you can get your hands on him for 25 Ancients. A very good deal, a very good champion, useful in a lot of different areas. Stagnite may not be a bad option because he's able to not only provide you that decreased attack that you're looking for, right? But he brings some more things to the table, such as that A2 that does give you that decreased attack gives you decreased defense. Maybe you're trying to get a little bit more damage out in tandem with that decreased speed. So he's actually not a bad option, right? Although the chance is a little bit low, and he kind of is a little bit on the book heavy side of things. You know, you got to be careful. He's basically like what, 12 books or so. It's about on par for what you would normally expect. But regardless, you know, a fully ascended, fully awakened Stagnite who has decreased speed, you know, decreased defense and decreased attack, those are all some ideal debuffs that can help you kind of make some strides, pick up some momentum. Now, I'm going to give you another alternative of an option that may be a little unorthodox, but it's still worth noting, would be someone like UDK. You know, we have shown him in showcases for like our Spider team when Artec first came out. He was kind of like our sponge tank to basically kind of manage whatever we took from a single target, like, you know, one-off hits. Now, that passive doesn't kick in as much because it has to be a direct hit, not an AoE hit, and most of the Hydra heads don't really do that. So, like, this passive doesn't really kick in that regard. However, you do get shields, you do get continuous heals, so that's something he can play from a survivability standpoint, right? He also provides Provoke, which may not be too bad of a chance. You know, it's an option, right? He starts up at 30%, which, you know, when it's fully booked is 40, 50%. You know, it's a flip of a coin at that point, right? You can probably get a chance to provoke, you know, the Decay Head if that's one of your focuses. But in tandem with that, he does provide an AoE decreased defense. So, you know, champions that could do a little bit of everything, right? They're giving you a little bit more in tandem with what they got going on as their main priority case use in your team. And that's what you're looking for, right? Some other really cool examples that I thought would be noteworthy in terms of like outlets would be like maybe you could look at Venom Mage, right? Venom Mage is someone that can apply heal reduction, right? And then in tandem with the decreased attack and decreased defense. Now, mind you, this is only one enemy, so that is something to be alarmed of. But you do get some extra passive mitigation, you know, 15% less damage from Hydra, especially as you know, remember this mechanic or this particular you know, content that you're going to be participating in. It has a soft enrage timer, so it gets harder as time goes by, and you're going to be basically playing to just keep your team, you know, surviving at one point, unless you're really doing well with control and you have your damage outlets doing what they need to do. You may see yourself like, all right, man, I'm starting to take a little bit of a hit. This kind of hurts a little bit. Well, that extra mitigation does do you well, right? And that's why, like, key champions, you know, that can provide that extra little bit of utility on top of that is very, very ideal. And that's the whole concept of this. I just want to introduce to you guys the concept and the focus of, like, how you can manage that, right? Now, I also wanted to kind of say something that works a little bit in tandem with that. If you know you're going to take a significant amount of damage, why not do what the Hydra head himself is doing towards you? And I'm going to use this as an example, but Geomancer, you know, we talked about that mitigation, you know, his passive is another 15%. So if you're taking 15% from Venom Mage and 15% from Geomancer, that's 30% mitigation, right? I'm not sure if it adds up that way, but it does help. It does help, and that's the main concept, right? HP Burn being applied onto him. HP Burns being a great damage outlet debuff. Weaken is going to help you put in some more damage, right? But say, for instance, you use Geomancer in a fight where Wrath is in play, and you do happen to have, you know, you have to worry about, like, that that proc from him, that vengeance, stacking up becomes an issue. What you could do instead is you can utilize someone like Geomancer as well. If you're gonna put damage into play, I'm going to abuse that. So he reflects it, right? That passive giving him a redirect of some of that damage, or deflecting some of that damage, 30% of it as a matter of fact, to a target of your choice. So happens to be the one that's under HP burned by you. You can maybe toss it like, what's a head that's really annoying? Well, Decay, maybe you're not having enough efficiency at keeping him locked down with Provoke. So let's go ahead and put Burn on him, and then let's use our team to force the head of the head of Raft to pop, which means that now whenever we get to the point where we're at these stacks, this breaking point here, we'll be able to do maybe a little bit more here. We'll get that decreased attack in there from Mishinaki, and then we'll go ahead and force the pop. We'll go ahead and pop it in there. That little pop right there alone gives us a little bit more extra damage that now we're abusing. So it's like, all right, Wrath, you want to play ball? Let's take what you're going to throw at us and use it to our advantage, right? While also mitigating it, So big value in terms of keeping your team alive, big value in being able to utilize a champion to abuse the mechanic that's kind of a problem for you, perhaps, right? And Geomancer is one of those champions that can do that, and that's really, really cool to see, right? With all that being said, I hope this video finds you well. I want to give a special thank you to everybody that's in the community. I know I've been kind of doing updates on this, but believe it or not, we are less than 10 away from our big 500 subscribers. So if you want to be a part of the first 500 that's ever gotten SoulSaint to the next plateau that we're looking to aim for, maybe we open up that YouTube partnership program. It would definitely mean a lot to us. Definitely feel free to comment, like the video, comment, subscribe, the whole 9 yards. It definitely helps us out a lot. Pushes our content out there for other people to take a look at it. Watching it in its entirety, we're trying to push a certain amount of watch hours as well. It's all a part of the program that we're trying to be a participant of. So it definitely helps us out if you are, one of those people who are triumphing behind it and helping us get through it. And I hope this video helps you out in some regard. With that being said, always remember, guys, stay ascendant.
Got the